Who doesn't love the katana? It's sharp, it's elegant, and it's a weapon from a time of honor and discipline. Do you know who else liked the katana? People in the Ming Dynasty. Greetings everyone, welcome to the Sword Lab. Today we have another beautiful sword to review, the Wo Yao Dao from LK Chen. So, it is called the Wo Yao Dao because of two things. Number one, the term Yao or Yao Dao means that this will be slung from the waist or the belt, like that. So that's where the Yao Dao comes in. The character Wo means dwarf, but at the time and throughout history, it has been used as a term for the Japanese. Now, it is sort of pejorative, but it was a commonly used term even amongst the Japanese. That particular term, wo, is probably best known to martial artists today in the term woku or woko from the Japanese pirates that plagued the coast. This is connected to that, but we'll get to that. This particular sword is part of a kind of trilogy that LK Chen has done with the Ming Dynasty swords. Now, these are Ming Dynasty in name. This is where the designs appeared. This particular model is based off of a late Ming, early Qing blade. In the fittings are a little bit different, but we'll get to that. The other swords are the Ming Dao, which a bunch of people have done some reviews on already, and the Dao, which is related to this one a little bit. We'll go into some comparisons here, but I'm going to do a full review on this sword as well. Like this sword here, this is a one-handed sword. Most Japanese swords were two-handed. And this is because by the time of the Ming Dynasty, Yao Dao, or Dao in general, were, at least in the military, a sidearm. So they were there to support either a spear, a firearm, some other long type of weapon. When they were used that way, they were used with a shield similar to this. They were usually made of rattan, but they were circular in this fashion. We'll get into more techniques of the Yao Dao with the shield when we get into the Qijia saber as well. Okay. So a little quick history on the Japanese sword in the Ming Dynasty. I've done a deep dive on this on my blog. I will link it in the description here. Go check that out to see some of the more detailed oriented things. But we'll do the abbreviated version here. The Ming Dynasty had a kind of contentious relationship with trade and Japan. And during this time, the Japanese were importing, or the Chinese were importing from the Japanese tens of thousands of swords. At the end of the Ming Dynasty, probably hundreds of thousands of Japanese swords were imported for the collector's market, the civilian market, and the military market. The techniques used in Japanese swords were immediately latched onto as being superior to what was generally seen in Chinese forges. This interjection of these techniques, which were inspired by Tang Dynasty techniques, then kind of revitalized sword making in China in the Ming Dynasty. As the Chinese imported more and more Japanese swords and they became more popular, they started making swords in the Japanese style like this one. In the Chinese versions of this were almost always one-handed so that they could be used with a shield or as a sidearm for another weapon, like a long weapon or a gun. And they generally used Chinese types of techniques. We'll go into a big deep dive into the connections between Chinese sword making and Japanese sword making because it's a very, very interesting topic, but it's a very, very large one. Qi Guang preferred this blade shape, this blade cross-section, the curve, all of that for his soldiers. So in his various texts and in the various Ming Dynasty texts, you can find a representation of this sword many places. In fact, in the Wu Beizhi, Mao Yanyi talks about it as the Yao Dao and the Chang Dao are the two sabers that are still used in the military. Okay, so the actual weapon. The actual weapon itself is based on a late Ming, early Qing piece. The fittings on the original were all replaced. It was found as just a blade. That is because in the 20th century, 1958, I believe, was the Great Leap Forward. And the Great Leap Forward in communist China had lots of people making backyard furnaces to create iron and steel for the government. As such, they pretty much did any type of metal they could find. And unfortunately, very many swords of antiquity were probably lost to these backyard furnaces. The fittings are iron. On the original piece, the fittings were done by Vince Evans. Philip Tom is the person who designed the fittings and the way this had all gone together. Both of these men are, giants amongst Chinese sword collecting and antiquities. So the original itself has this type of wrap here and all of these fittings, the hangers. The original has a kind of pebbled leather on it, which looks like ray skin. This is a faux leather. I believe they call it vegan leather. I'm not exactly sure what it is made of. Sort of smells sort of like PVC, but it's hard to tell. Most of it is stuck on there really nice, so it gives a really, really nice texture and feel. It's coming loose a little bit up here by here, but nothing too bad. Now, like I said, the fittings are iron. They have a kind of paint job on them, but it is actually very handsome. It's a very metallic. It really kind of reads as iron. Obviously, we have a lanyard. The wrap is cotton, so it's not silk, which would probably be a little bit softer. Sometimes it gets a little abrasive, but the more you use it, it softens up pretty nicely. The handle itself is of the curved style. There's also the straight style, which is on the Wo Yao Dao and the Ling Dao. And this is a feature that was probably imported from some of the steppe peoples, but has remained in Chinese Dao up to the present. It's of the Feng Shi style, which is the square style fittings. Now, that means that as you see, the scabbard is square, the handle is squared off. This here, obviously, that's not totally square, but you get the idea. This is contrasted with the round style, and it was I believe this is popular very much in the Qing. So you see this a lot in Qing Dynasty paintings. It's a style that was popular with officials and that kind of thing. And you see it now. And it's nice to see because, generally speaking, this was a style that was not seen a whole lot for us modern day martial artists. So it's a nice, very kind of historical style to have with this particular model. The other models are also in the Feng Shi style, so all of the LK Chens kind of fit into that family. Let's take a look at the blade. The blade here, I will put the steel, what steels they are, right underneath me here for that information. It is a pattern welded blade, although the pattern is very tight and the etch is not very deep, so it gives a very, very classic feeling of the original piece. And you can see, I'll put some pictures of the original blade up, and you can see the differences and similarities. So as far as a replica goes, that is a very nice little touch. That the blade pattern and the grain on the blade is also very similar. The handle and, or the guard, I should say, we have the blade collar here. And that is obviously, this is the Chinese style, but the Japanese swords have this particular thing there all the time. Now, the differences in the Japanese and the Chinese, which we'll get into, deeper, is the tip. The Japanese swords generally have a tip, which I cannot remember the name of right now. I will write it right here so that you can know that. This is just basically goes right into the tip. And I have cut with it. It's got a very nice stalwart spine, lots of meat behind this. This is a hefty sword. It's not terribly heavy, but it carries a lot of authority in the cut. It has a fairly thick geometry. I'll put some more pictures up in that case. And the curve is quite pronounced. So the only real negative I can take away from this sword is something that is kind of a reoccurring issue with LK Chen. They have some issues with their final finishing process, either in the polishing, packing, sharpening. One of those areas which will often leave small surface scratches or tool marks on the blade. Most of the time the polish and etch are beautiful, and these are just cosmetic little flaws. Most of them polish off pretty easily, but it's something to keep in mind when buying one. Okay, so the performance of it, it is a very nice sword. As I said, it is a little bit on the hefty side, but that's good. If you like that kind of thing, if you like a sword which is has a bit more blade presence, this is definitely the sword you want to get. The Qi Dao is a little bit lighter and a little bit shorter. I believe this blade is about 30 inches. That one's probably about 28 inches. So there you go. The Wo Yao Dao from LK Chen. Go ahead and check it out on their website. You can also get it from Cult of Athena. These are approaching $350, $400 on the market. I believe, for my money, it's worth it. They're extremely well constructed. I've been using this for about a month and a half, cutting with it, practicing with it, and it has held up. All the fittings are wonderfully tight. Like I said, a little bit of buckling here on the scabbard, where it's kind of coming loose. But other than that, everything in the sword is tight and tidy. So there you go. Anyway, we will go into more history into the Japanese swords and the Ming Dynasty sabers pretty soon here at the Sword Lab, so stay tuned for that. We'll also have the next review, which will be the Qi Yao Dao. It's a related saber, and we'll go into more of the uses and that aspect of this whole thing. So until then, take it easy. Patience, practice, perseverance.